I actually came to the world of storytelling through theater. Any other theater people here tonight? Okay. Guess not. All right. No, I thought there was more crossover in that Venn diagram. Well, you know. A friend of mine recently described my career in theater as an addiction, and I kind of like that as a metaphor, theater addiction. I've been doing it for over a decade at this point, and in retrospect, I think a heroin addiction actually might have been the better choice. See, with a theater addiction, you're broke all the time, and you're constantly having to justify yourself to friends and family members who don't understand what you do. And with a heroin addiction, these things are also true, but the edge is kind of taken off. On account of the heroin. To pay for my theater addictions, I've had a lot of different jobs, but the first job I ever had was street sweeper. So, for 10 hours at a time, I would walk up and down Clifton Hill in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. In case you guys are unfamiliar, Clifton Hill is like the Vegas Strip if the Vegas Strip was designed exclusively for preteens. It runs on cotton candy, corn syrup, and fear. So, for 10 hours at a time, I would walk up and down Clifton Hill, and I would try to keep it clean with my miniature broom and my miniature dustpan. And for the luxury of doing this task, I was paid $6.75 an hour, which was the student minimum wage at the time. My direct supervisor as a street sweeper was a dude named Randy. And Randy might have been 30, he might have been 55. I could never really tell. He had that sort of like ageless douchebag quality about him. You guys know the type? It's like the spray tan, like the cap teeth and the hair plugs from the 90s before they like really perfected the technique. So Randy's whole motif was meant to give him a sort of youthful vibe, but instead he was like a caricature of youth. He was like, if a Norm Kelly tweet could come to life. So like that's Randy. Randy and I never got along. And this might have been due to the fact that I was 14 when I started that job, and I had no prior work experience. Or it might have been due to the fact that Randy sucked ass. He was racist, he was homophobic, and he would set off at any little thing. He'd yell at the drop of a hat. And I found that out on my first day as a street sweeper. So, first day as a street sweeper, Randy is explaining to me that everything I have to sweep is from the giant statue of the world's fattest man, to the giant statue of the Frankenstein eating the hamburger. And when Randy said that, I chimed in, I paused him, I was like, oh, it's Frankenstein's monster, actually. And Randy's like, what? I'm like, oh, the guy with the bolts in his neck eating the hamburger on top of the Burger King, that's not Frankenstein. That's Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein was the name of his creator. And with that, Randy paused me and he said, fuck you. So that first day of sweeping the streets, I learned that if you walk for 10 hours in Converse shoes, your feet will turn into 2 giant blisters. And I learned that manic panic hair dye bleeds out in the midday sun. That day, my hair dye ran down the back of my neck and it just ruined my white khaki uniform. And I learned that if you walk the streets with a miniature broom and a miniature dustpan, people will just throw trash at you. That's something that happens. That day I was hit with a half a can of Pringles and a full bubblegum Slurpee. So by the end of the shift, I'm tired and I'm demoralized because sweeping the streets is like this Sisyphean task. Every time I think I'm done, I get to the bottom of Clifton Hill and I look up and it's just covered in garbage again. And it's pretty clear that I don't want to be a street sweeper anymore. So my shift is about to end, and that is when Randy finds me. And Randy lets me know that he found 4 candy wrappers by the pinball machines. And Randy lets me know that he had been watching me throughout the day, and I had not smiled, not even once. And Randy said that street sweeping was about commitment. And if I wanted to keep that job, I better show up tomorrow with a new uniform and a better fucking attitude. Thing was, I definitely didn't want to keep that job. That job was clearly terrible. I was going to move on to something more glamorous with my life, like dishwashing or Tim Hortons. So my dad picks me up around 2 a.m. That's the end of my shift, and I get into our minivan and I explain that I am done with street sweeping. I tell him that Randy sucks ass, that guy's my manager, he's terrible. I explained that day I got hit with a full bubblegum Slurpee and there's no way I'm ever going back to this. And Dad, he takes in that information and he gets real quiet. And then he says, Graham, the only reason you got that job is because one of my clients is the owner of the funhouse. If you quit, it will bring shame on our family. And I allowed that to sink in for a second. I needed nepotism to get a minimum wage job picking up trash by the side of the road, which is a humbling thought. So guys, I work as a street sweeper for 2 years. And during that time, I see some stuff. There are like countless children just like dizzy on lemonade. And there are these 3 40-year-olds who attempted to have a threesome in the funhouse ball pit. And there was this one dude who earnestly tried to steal the wax statue of Brendan Fraser. So amongst the everyday chaos of Niagara Falls, there's also Randy and his mood swings. And when he's not yelling at me, he's like philosophizing. He has these little packets of ideas, the best of which was hot dog theory. Randy said that Niagara Falls was a hot dog. And if anybody thought about it for too long, for any reason, the whole fucking thing would just be ruined. So hot dog theory brought me to my own theory about Niagara Falls. I think there's a dissonance to that place. There's kind of the gap between the natural beauty of the falls and like the neon lights of the casino. And if you spend too much time in that city, it sort of feels like ringing in your ears. Because it's a place you're supposed to visit. It's not a place you're supposed to stay. And I was stuck there. And it was awful. So, worst day as a street sweeper comes on one August afternoon when I got a call from Randy on my walkie-talkie, and he says that I need to report to the Mystery Maze immediately. Now, the Mystery Maze was one of our attractions. It was a former parking lot they had converted into a labyrinth using green and purple plastic panels. The Mystery Maze cost $10.99 to get into, and if you completed the maze in under 5 minutes, you won an additional ticket to the Mystery Maze. So I get to the attraction, and Randy's there waiting for me, and he's kind of quiet, and he goes, "Kid, I'm gonna give it to you straight. Somebody took a shit in the maze." Randy doesn't know the details, but he needs me to go in with my broom and dustpan and clean it up. He also has a bucket of water, in case it's necessary. So the kicker to all this is that despite the poo, Randy had not shut down the attraction. There are still tourists inside, and it's my job to locate the feces before one of the tourists did. So Randy tells me this, and I start to protest. I'm like, dude, this you can't. They're paying customers, like, and that's not in my job description. And with that, Randy pauses me, and he says, "Fuck you." So I'm being paid $6.75 to look for shit in a maze. And quitting will bring shame on my family. So I don't know if you guys have ever looked for something you didn't want to find before. It's like a really weird experience. And I'd like to remind you at the start of this show, Marsha pointed out that when you're listening to stories, it's kind of like you're experiencing them yourselves. So just let's go down this path, shall we? I enter the labyrinth, and I'm immediately hit with this like dense, thick, breathable stink fog. It's just terrible, and it smells like rotting vegetable and wet animal, and every time I turn a corner, the stink, it just seems to intensify, and it's terrible. And I finally find the poo by the southwest corner of the maze. Now, I had assumed that despite the stink, what I was looking for was a child-sized Duke. Like a little accident just like left behind after a kitty could not escape the maze on time. But no! What I found was a full-blown adult log. It was like unbroken and half-coiled on the concrete floor. And the thing is so big that it takes 3 full swipes of my broom to get into the dustpan. We're all doing this together. And this intensifies the stink, and it smears, and it's bad. So I take my bucket of water that Randy provided me with, and I pour it on top, and I watch as this fecal mixture just trickles underneath the plastic panels, and then, audience, this amazing thing happens. There is a loud, distinctive, disgusted yelp. And it was one of the tourists. And being in Niagara Falls, surely this was not the waterfall that they had been expecting. But maybe, just maybe, it was the waterfall that they deserved. So I exit the maze, and Randy's there waiting for me. He's got this huge smile on his face. And he says, "Kid, what you just did took real commitment. Like actual commitment. And if you keep up that attitude, one day you too could be a manager just like me." And I look at the Duke in my dustpan, and I look at Randy's hair plugs, and not for the first time, and not for the last time, I think that I need to get the fuck out of Niagara Falls. Thanks very much, guys.